Good morning, people, and welcome to another Vlogmas. Today is day 19, I do believe, and it's going to be a big one because I'm going to discuss something that I've wanted to discuss since we very first started doing the Disneyland Paris podcast, and that is comparing Disneyland Paris to Walt Disney World. Now, I don't want to compare it as in this is this and this is the other and this is better than that. It's just I've had a lot of comments, I suppose, and criticism almost from people. But hang on, let me backtrack. I might be a little scratchy in the voice today. I have a small cold, and also I was teaching all day yesterday and we were having way too much Christmas fun and now I can't talk. So obviously, Disneyland Paris is my home park. That's the place we've been the most, starting when I was a teenager. Hugh and I went early in our relationship when we were in our early 20s, and then when we started our own family, then we went more often. And I had been to Disney World, Florida once for one day. We went on a Caribbean cruise with my parents, and we started and finished in Florida, and I begged them, can we go to Disney World if we're in Florida? They weren't really into it, but we drove from St. Pete's Beach to Magic Kingdom for one day and back again. It had a big impact on me because this is where I started being desperate to go to Disneyland Paris. So that's the background. Now, after many years of going to Disneyland Paris and being thoroughly enamoured and in love with it, it was paradise in my eyes, we booked a trip to Walt Disney World. And someone said to me, you won't be able to go to Paris again once you've been to Walt Disney World. Well, I hadn't even been at that point, really, other than that one day as a teenager. And I didn't like this. I didn't want something to make something I love so much look bad. I didn't want that to happen. I didn't like this implication that Disneyland Paris wasn't good enough, or I just wasn't a fan of that comment. Now, I've had it said in several ways since. I know people who have DVC members who've been to Walt Disney World for years and years and have never been to Paris. And when I've said, oh, you should go to Paris, they go, like that. And it really winds me up. So I want to put this to bed a bit. What is the difference? Why do people feel like that? People who haven't experienced both feel like that. So I'm going to start with a bit of a pedestrian comparison. Perhaps. We have about 15 minutes drive from my house, outside the biggest local town. We have a Tesco Extra, a huge superstore that sells electricals, clothes, toys, magazines, along with all your groceries. You can choose from 25 different brands of olive oil if you want. They also do click and collect, self-service, scan as you shop, everything you can imagine at this Tesco superstore. And then 5 minutes drive from my house, we have a Tesco Metro, which is just your local 7-Eleven style thing. It is the same company selling similar products. The staff are trained the same way and wear the same uniform, but it is smaller. It has a little less choice and it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. Now, is one better than the other? No! They serve totally different purposes, and I go to the Tesco Metro far more often than I go to the Tesco Extra, and I avoid the Tesco Extra on busy days and holidays. I wouldn't go there on Christmas Eve. It would be an absolute nightmare. They are different products, and this is what you get with Disneyland Paris and Walt Disney World. So I'm going to go straight into some more specifics, and I'm going to start with the points where Disneyland Paris wins a bit. In my opinion, and in many people's opinion, it is the most aesthetically beautiful of the Disney parks. Now, I haven't been to the Eastern parks, and I hear that Tokyo is bonkers and Shanghai has got a real kind of cultural twist to it. But from what I've experienced, it's the most aesthetically beautiful. Now, the reasoning is that by the time Tony Baxter and his team designed Disneyland Paris, they'd had 30 odd years of experience in theme park design in the Imagineering sector. So they knew what worked and what didn't work. They were starting from scratch and they were given carte blanche. So they were able to really focus themselves on creating complete stories. They were to get the A-list rides the E-ticket rides, but the A-list rides and attractions from all the other parks and bring them over to Disneyland Paris and improve and perfect them. So I'm going to give you a few examples. Frontierland in Disneyland Paris has got its own complete story and mythology that spans the entire land, the legend of Thunder Mesa. So it gives reason, direction, purpose and narrative to Big Thunder Mountain that ties in with the narrative for the Haunted Mansion. And it also ties in with the Lucky Nugget Saloon and the Thunder Mesa Mercantile and so on and so on. Fort Comstock. They've all got their own story that goes through it. So it works as one complete package. Whereas if I use Magic Kingdom in Disney World as an example, Big Thunder Mountain was kind of tacked on after, and it's right next to Splash Mountain, and they're kind of wedged in a corner and they've not really much to do with each other, and it might have started out differently, but at the moment it's gone a bit confused. That's not the case in Paris. It's fully rounded and fully imagined. And that brings me on to, because it's such a beautiful land, is Frontierland, the views, the sight lines in Disneyland Paris. This was all pre-planned and it exists pretty much as it was designed originally. Yes, there have been some small extensions, notably Indiana Jones and the Storybook Boat Ride and Casey Jr. in Fantasyland, but there's very little case of attractions been wedged between other attractions and attractions been reimagined into something they weren't first meant to be. The park still exists as it was designed because it was designed so fantastically to start with. So if you look at Frontierland, as you walk through the gates, you get this amazingly well-balanced National Gallery style vista that includes the mountain balanced beautifully with the Haunted Mansion there. Sorry, Phantom Manor. Come on, Lucy, get it right. And the shape of the lake. You will often have the Molly Brown docked between the two. Absolutely perfect. But then if you walk up to Boot Hill and see it from a different direction, you get a completely different yet perfectly balanced view from there, and it just carries on throughout the park all over the place. You can find these absolutely perfect, because they were designed that way, landscape views. Because of what I've said about the American parks, I'm talking primarily about the Magic Kingdoms, because they compare so directly. Because of what you've got them with them evolving over decades and decades and decades, and rides and attractions being switched out and added, a lot of that has been lost, and there's very cluttered feels at certain points to the American parks that you just don't get at Paris. Now, I'm going to use that to bounce into a bit of a negative for Paris and a plus for Walt Disney World, and that is, in the Magic Kingdom, the density of rides, attractions and shows is, I don't have facts and figures here, but it feels like it's double. In that space of Frontierland in Paris, all you've got is Phantom Manor, the Steamboat, Big Thunder Mountain, and that's pretty much it for Frontierland, which is a huge land. You also have the walkthrough of Fort Comstock. You also have Pocahontas's Village Playground, which is a little adventure playground for kids. And if you walk way up the path, you've got the Frontierland Theatre. But if you think of Frontierland in Walt Disney World, you've got Splash Mountain, Big Thunder Mountain, Tom Sawyer's Island and the riverboats, the Country Bears Jamboree going on there. You've then got several restaurants dotted around, and that kind of merges into Liberty Square anyway, so you've got a lot of queues going on there. Queues overlap each other and bang into each other, and you need people with signposts, and it's very dense and cluttered, and you just don't get that big open feel. And the fact that you've got the height of the various mountains really makes a difference. Now I'm going to take that idea into Adventureland, where you have got, am I right in thinking, you've got Indiana Jones way, 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 way up a path, so that's kind of out. But other than that, you've only got Pirates of the Caribbean as a ride-through attraction, is that right? Because then you've got Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse, you've got Adventure Isle, again, you've got another playground, you've got the Aladdin walkthrough, but other than that, you have got acres of paths, caves, mountains, hidden gullies, bridges that you can just explore. Now, in the American parks as well, there's areas that you can just explore, but there always seems to be something either getting you to ride it, buy it, or eat it all over the place. Whereas here, you've just got theming and nothing but. You could walk miles just in that one land if you decided you were going to explore every nook and cranny. Now, you don't get that kind of open space in the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World, and so you don't get that feeling of getting lost. You can easily go somewhere in Disneyland Paris, even on the busiest days, and be the only person in that particular corner because it's so luscious and overgrown and there's so many little walkways and alleys. It's gorgeous. I'm getting all squishy for it now, aren't I? The castle is the best castle, and we've got a dragon underneath. Now, in Walt Disney World, you can eat inside the castle. The architecture of our very, very narrow turreted one means we couldn't fit a restaurant in, but it's got the cloisters, and you've still got Cinderella's table down in the cloisters, so we still have a restaurant there. Now, part of the reason it's so aesthetically beautiful is the Imagineers were given the edict as when they were designing it that it should appeal to European sensibilities, and there's a very strong cultural attachment, sort of romanticism within art. We have a lot of the Gothic architecture and medieval architecture in our streets and in our towns. We've even got it right here where we live. We don't need to go out far to find a Tudor building with the cladding. So they really had to up the fantasy element when they were in Disneyland Paris. I think there was a lot of pressure, but they did. They delivered. In Paris, we have a lot of walk-through attractions, which I love for experience's sake. And they are generally, unless you're on an incredibly busy day, they are generally without queues, so you can just walk in and walk around. I am thinking of Alice's Curious Labyrinth, still one of my favourite attractions ever. You can, I don't want to say kill 20 minutes, because it's very well spent, but you can spend a full 20 minutes just experiencing something without having to queue or sit or get strapped in. It's fantastic for the kiddies. They just run around there and it's so exciting. There's something around every turn. But then you've got the smaller ones like the Dragon Under the Castle. I've just talked about the caves, the Adventure Isle. You've got Aladdin's Passage, you've got Nautilus. And these things that you can explore at your own pace. And there just isn't as many of those stateside, which means everything has to be queued for, which is a big down. Now, just one more thing while I enthuse about the design of the park, and that is, again, because of the lack of density of attractions and the way it's been designed for these big open vista aesthetics, it never, in my opinion, feels as busy as Walt Disney World does. And it's because, again, this was designed for perfection and has not been changed. You don't have these awkward bottleneck points the same way that you do in Walt Disney World. In Walt Disney World, I'm thinking between Peter Pan and Small World and the Rapunzel bathrooms going round to the Haunted Mansion, nearly every time I walked through there, it was penguin waddling shoulder to shoulder, except when I was there very early in the morning. There's not really an area that sucks in people like that at Disneyland Paris. So you're a lot freer. So it never has that real kind of claustrophobically busy feel, which Walt Disney World has most of the time, from what I can gather. I'm going to interrupt the video here to remind you that one thing they do have in Orlando is Give Kids the World Village. That is a fantastic facility that offers medical care to critically ill children so that their families are able to experience Walt Disney World holidays. We are raising money for the village, so if you look in the description down below, there's a link and you can donate and help us get to our very modest £100 goal by Christmas Eve. Thank you very much. Right, let's go on to a few other points where people might have a valid point where they say that Walt Disney World wins. Now, first of all, like my Tesco Extra versus Tesco Metro example, there's a heck of a lot more of it. Now, this means that you can have the 2-week fully immersive family holiday, living a different life kind of feel. Now, that really makes a difference because the maximum still that I would go to Disneyland Paris for is 5 days. I mean, I would never get bored of Disneyland Paris. I could stay there for 6 weeks and not get bored, but it's hard to justify it, isn't it, in terms of money and times off work, because you have done everything by day 3 and then you repeat your favourite attractions on day 4, and then just before you go home on day 5, you just get those last few bits. You don't need more than that at all to go to Disneyland Paris. Whereas Walt Disney World, you can go for 2 weeks and you've still missed half of it. So just having that constant stimulation, being able to justify that length of time and spend it away from home with your family, without that anticipation of, oh, we go back the day after tomorrow, you know, that's a big plus. People say that they think that Walt Disney World is overfacing because there's so much of it. We didn't find that. We don't hire a car, we take Walt Disney Transport. So everything, as far as we're concerned, is at the bus stop. We don't feel like we are, or, you know, if you're on the monorail loop, it's at the monorail stop, etc. We never felt like we were travelling miles and miles and going all over the place and covering loads of space, because you go to the same bus stop, you sit on the bus, and then you get off and you're at the park. So I don't get that it's too big thing. There's a lot of it to do, but it's designed to be at your fingertips, so it doesn't feel too much like that. And of course, I have to go into the fact that they've got 4 full satisfying theme parks. Yes, we have got the studios at Disneyland Paris, but until this expansion takes place, it's only really ever been a half-day park, and a fairly underwhelming half-day park at that. Now, you've got 4 full-day, well, not just 1 full day, 2, 3 full-day parks at Walt Disney World. So that means that you've got all the different pros and cons and design elements for that. Animal Kingdom is the only design park that I think rivals Disneyland Paris. And again, I think because it was built in the 90s, it hasn't evolved as much, it hasn't been redesigned as much, and so it still holds that as the Imagineers envisioned it, you know, sight lines, vistas, etc. It's just amazing and completely different. And I've already mentioned that Magic Kingdom has got twice as many rides and attractions at Disneyland Paris. So in many ways that has to be a plus, doesn't it? So much more to see and do, so many more days and hours spent there. It's a plus. Right, let's talk food. I have to say, overall, Walt Disney World has to win for food. For starters, it is a feature of the parks. It's an attraction in itself, and it is pitched as that on Instagram, on all your various vlogs and blogs. The different restaurants, the different snacks you can get is a huge thing in Walt Disney World. But I think part of the reason of that is we don't have the same snack culture in Europe. It's funny being in the UK, because the UK is a bit like the USA light. We kind of straddle both continents, don't we? We're definitely not continental European. That is a different culture to us, but we're different from the US as well, and yet we take elements of both. So I can only talk to my perspective, but as far as I see it, in Europe in general, the snack culture just isn't the same as it is in the US, nor is the food excesses, kind of selling something as this with a name, and you get, you know, this, the burgers that have got 5 different elements to them, and that is a big, because it's got wow factor, that becomes an attraction. But we don't really use food as wow factor. We use food to eat, you know. Now, having said that, your signature restaurants in Paris, I'm thinking particularly, we recently went to Captain Jack's. The food there, the atmosphere, it's a 10 out of 10. So you can't beat a 10 out of 10. There are several 10 out of 10 restaurants in Walt Disney World as well. But I don't want to say the food in Walt Disney World is better than the food in Paris, and then you think that Captain Jack's is worse. That's a 10 out of 10. They've got 10 out of 10s. There are some fantastic buffets in Paris with some really, really good food in them. And I often associate buffets with slightly ropey food that I might have had on overnight ferries and things. No, really, really good different buffets. And the theming within the restaurants, Chez Remy, amazing theming. Absolutely amazing theming. Cafe Agrabah, Plaza Gardens, gorgeous places to eat. I just mean overall the quantity, the variety, and particularly the Instagram worthy snacks. That's what we're lacking at Disneyland Paris, and it's a bit of a shame. There is also the problem with opening hours. This has always been bad, and it's been worse since the pandemic, in that when people would traditionally eat in continental Europe is a lot later than us in the UK, and I believe in the US would eat. So restaurants will be shut at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, which is when we would be thinking about eating, because it's more traditional to eat at 8 p.m. and they'll open later. Just check your app and roll with it. It's not worth getting crossover, although we do get crossover it quite a bit, I have to say. And then for me, the biggest difference maybe is in the, oh, I've got to be careful how I say this, but the customer service. Walt Disney World customer service is world class, over the top, 10 out of 10. Every single person we encounter for a 2-week holiday is just phenomenal. Now, in Disneyland Paris, they have had the Disney training, they have the same Disney ethic, and you will get Disney service, but it's not quite as consistent, and it's not quite as in your face as it is over in America. Now, this again, I think, is a European thing, and I can only give my perspective, and I'm not a sociology expert and things like that, but because it's such a capitalist society over in America, and because a lot of the service industry live on tips, there's this idea that if you're paying money, I've never been comfortable with the idea of being served in general, particularly. So the person paying the money is treated with a certain amount of deference and you're in charge. Whereas I think generally in Europe, we don't have that feel. It's the person giving the service is the person with power, and we get to experience that service if we give them money. And so you don't get that customer is king thing. Now, I'm really oversimplifying 2 entire continents here, but there is a big difference in general between customer service in the US and customer service in Europe. And in continental Europe, in Disneyland Paris, what you're getting is American customer service, but delivered by Europeans. So the product is the same, they've been trained the same, and the company ethos is the same, but it isn't necessarily delivered in quite the same way. I think that is maybe a fair and accurate way of putting it. And you can, I know you're going to shred me in the comments and you can say your experiences. We've had some really magical interactions in Disneyland Paris. And that service thing kind of ties into what I think I might call magical extras. Like, again, the Tesco Metro, the Tesco Extra analogy. Because you've got so much more infrastructure focused around Walt Disney World, they're able to deliver more details, like they've got their own transportation network, etc., which we have some shuttle buses in Disneyland Paris, but everyone walks everywhere, so you don't need them. And different services that are offered, you know, being able to have your bags transferred, bell services, working for you for all these very, very small things, but it all kind of adds up in the general experience. And I think the last thing I've got to talk about is the hotels and resorts. Well, I've just said it all. In Disneyland Paris, you have hotels where you have rooms with beds in them and all the staff and services that go along with that. Whereas in Walt Disney World, you have resorts that have got basically water parks in the back garden and playgrounds and various restaurant options and the big sprawling resorts that you can walk around. There's running trails, and that is because people stay for longer and the weather's better for outdoor pursuits and things like that. It's an apple and oranges thing. So I don't think the quality is better either side of the Atlantic. I think the quality is the same, but in Disneyland Paris you get hotels, in Walt Disney World you get resorts. Now, I did mention the weather there. That is a pro and a con, whichever way you look at it. Florida is hot. That's the only thing I can say. It's hot year round. You will get people who say, oh, we went in January and it got quite nippy, it was down to 10 degrees, and you're like, please. Paris is like full Kenny from South Park, hood up, got your hand warmers in, having to go inside the restaurants every half an hour to warm up, kind of cold. If you go in January, it is biting cold. But then in summer, it's actually really nice, mild, dry. I say mild, we've been when it's been 34 degrees in the summer, but it's not that humid, choking kind of heat that you can get in Florida. So it really, there's pros and cons to both. I quite like the fact that it's cold at Christmas. I like going at Christmas with my hat and my scarf on and my gloves and listening to Christmas carols in the cold. I think it would be weird to go to Florida at Christmas, but that's just the Yorkshire girl in me who doesn't compute that kind of difference. Do you know, one more thing? I'm going back and forth. Rides. Wherever they have the same ride in America and in Paris, I believe that the Paris version is better. And again, I think it's because they generally came after the US version, and so they were able to be improved slightly. Now, a big thing that I noticed on a lot of the rides is the ride starts as you're coming out of the queue area, but the light seeps into the ride experience and you can still hear the noise. That happened a lot in the US, whereas they seem to have solved it in Paris. Almost every attraction that might be like that, they've managed to get you into the attraction and turn a sharp corner and black out the lights almost immediately. I'm thinking Peter Pan, I'm thinking Pirates, I'm thinking the way the Small World tunnel works. You don't seem to get that really awkward crossover at the beginning and end where you can still see and hear the queue after the ride has begun. That's just my observations, but I firmly believe that where the rides exist in both, we have the better version. Maybe it's just the same way that you always prefer your grandma's apple pie. I don't know. Right, I've talked a lot on this subject and I'm very well aware I'm going to have to edit a few things and move some things around. So I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you very much for listening to that ramble. I'm sure that you've got a lot to add to it. Even if you've never been to one of them, if you've been to the other, you will have an opinion on this. So do let me know in the comments down below. I do love a good discussion, and I will see you tomorrow.